Michael Chen, a 34-year-old electrical engineer, had just moved into the Oak Ridge condominiums 6 months ago. He'd chosen the complex for its modern amenities and proximity to his new job at Quantum Dynamics, where he specialized in power management systems. The move represented a fresh start after his divorce, a chance to rebuild in a community that promised luxury living with like-minded professionals. His unit, 2B, featured a small but well-designed patio that overlooked the community garden. Michael had transformed the space with potted herbs and a comfortable chair where he often sat with his coffee laptop balanced on his knees, enjoying the morning sun before heading to work. One Saturday morning in early April, Michael sat at his kitchen island, sorting through his monthly bills. His brow furrowed as he studied his electricity statement. For the third consecutive month, his consumption had risen by nearly 20% compared to his typical usage. At first, he attributed it to the unusually cold winter. Perhaps his heating system was less efficient than advertised. But now, with spring temperatures rising, the explanation no longer made sense. "This can't be right," he muttered, pulling up his usage history on his tablet. The graph showed clear spikes during weekdays, particularly between 11 a.m. and 1 p.m., precisely when he was at work. Michael prided himself on his energy-efficient habits. He even unplugged appliances when not in use. Something wasn't adding up. He made a quick call to the utility company, but the representative confirmed the readings came directly from his smart meter. "Not a billing error, sir. Those are your actual consumption patterns." Michael spent the rest of the weekend methodically checking each appliance, unplugging devices, and monitoring his smart meter readings. Nothing seemed amiss, yet the mysterious midday power drains continued to appear in the data. The following Tuesday, Michael called in sick, partly due to a genuine migraine and partly to investigate the power mystery. Around 11:30 a.m., while nursing his headache with a cup of tea by the kitchen window, he noticed movement on his patio. Deborah Wilson, the intimidating HOA president from Unit 3A, was carefully sliding open his patio gate. The 52-year-old woman, with her perpetually pinched expression and perfectly highlighted bob, looked furtively around before wheeling her sleek electric scooter toward Michael's outdoor outlet. Michael watched dumbfounded as Deborah plugged a charging cable into his outlet with the efficiency of someone who had performed this routine many times before. She adjusted the scooter, checked her watch, and strode away with the confidence of someone who believed they were completely justified in their actions. For several moments, Michael stood frozen by his window, coffee cup halfway to his lips. Deborah Wilson, the same woman who had issued him a violation notice for hanging his bike on his patio railing instead of using the designated storage area. The same woman who had spent 15 minutes at the last HOA meeting discussing the deteriorating community standards when someone had placed their recycling bin out 6 hours early. The pieces suddenly clicked into place. His missing electricity, the midday power spikes, the perfectly timed intervals that aligned with Deborah's lunch breaks from her job at the real estate office down the street. Michael felt a mixture of indignation and vindication as he watched his meter readings tick upward in real time on his phone. He snapped several photos through the window and waited. Sure enough, 53 minutes later, Deborah returned, unplugged her scooter, and wheeled it away as casually as someone retrieving their mail. $200, Michael whispered to himself, calculating the approximate cost of the electricity Deborah had stolen over the past 3 months. But more than the money, it was the sheer hypocrisy that made his blood boil. Something would have to be done. Michael spent the evening rehearsing what he would say to Deborah. He paced his living room, weighing his options, and finally decided that a direct, adult conversation was the most reasonable approach. Surely, once confronted, she would acknowledge her actions, apologize, and perhaps offer to compensate him for the stolen electricity. After all, they were all professionals living in an upscale community. The following evening, after seeing Deborah's silver Lexus pull into her assigned parking space, Michael gave her 20 minutes to settle in before walking the short distance to Unit 3A. He smoothed his button-down shirt, took a deep breath, and knocked firmly on her door. Through the frosted glass, he could see a figure approach. The door opened precisely 3 inches, enough for Deborah to peer out, but not enough to constitute a welcome. Yes. Her tone suggested he was interrupting something important. "Good evening, Deborah. I'm Michael Chen from 2B. Do you have a moment to talk?" The door opened another 2 inches as she assessed him. "I'm quite busy with HOA matters this evening. Is this an urgent issue?" Michael cleared his throat. "Actually, it is somewhat important. I've noticed some unusual activity with my electricity usage, and I believe I'd identified the cause." He kept his voice steady, professional. "Yesterday, I was home sick and happened to see you charging your electric scooter using the outlet on my patio." Deborah's expression didn't change, but her posture stiffened. "Excuse me?" "I have photos," Michael continued, trying to keep accusation out of his voice. "And my electricity bills show consistent spikes during weekday lunchtimes for the past 3 months. I just wanted to discuss this with you directly before." "Mr. Chen," Deborah interrupted, her voice taking on a rehearsed quality that suggested she dealt with difficult neighbors regularly. I am the president of this homeowners association. I've lived in Oak Ridge for 11 years and have helped establish the standards that make this community desirable. Are you seriously suggesting that I would steal electricity from a neighbor? Michael felt his prepared speech crumbling. I'm not suggesting anything. I saw you yesterday and I have the photos too. What you think you saw was likely a misunderstanding, she cut in again. Perhaps you saw me inspecting the common areas, which is my responsibility as HOA president. Or perhaps your medication for your illness affected your perception. The condescension in her voice made Michael's face grow warm. I wasn't on any medication, and there's no misunderstanding about what I saw. Deborah's eyes narrowed. Mr. Chen making false accusations against neighbors is specifically prohibited under Section 7.3 of our community bylaws. Such behavior creates a hostile living environment. The door opened fully now as she seemed to gain confidence. While we're discussing community standards, I've been meaning to address the excessive height of your decorative plants on your patio. Vegetation exceeding 24 inches from container top is a violation of Section 12.8. Michael blinked, thrown by the sudden change of subject. My herbs? That's what you want discussed right now? Rules exist for a reason, Mr. Chen. She reached beside her door and produced a camera, snapping a quick photo of him standing there. I'll be documenting this conversation and your aggressive approach in my records. And yes, your herbaceous overgrowth will be noted at our next meeting. Before Michael could respond, Deborah continued with practiced efficiency. Additionally, I noticed your window coverings appear to be off-white rather than the approved alpine snow shade. You'll be receiving formal notice about these violations by week's end. She began closing the door. If you continue to make unfounded accusations, I'll have no choice but to bring it before the full board. Good evening, Mr. Chen. The door clicked shut, leaving Michael standing in the hallway, his prepared speech useless, his evidence unexamined, and somehow now facing multiple HOA violations he hadn't known existed 5 minutes earlier. Michael returned to his condo seething with frustration. He tossed his keys onto the counter with more force than necessary, rattling his collection of engineering awards. The confrontation had gone even worse than he'd anticipated. Not only had Deborah denied everything, but she'd somehow turned the tables, making him feel like the wrongdoer. This isn't over, he muttered, pulling out his laptop. The next morning, Michael skipped his usual pre-work routine and instead headed straight to Electromart. He purchased a small, weather-resistant security camera with Wi-Fi connectivity and motion detection capabilities. He also picked up a digital electric meter that could be installed in line with his outdoor outlet to precisely measure power consumption. That evening, after carefully reading the HOA bylaws regarding security equipment, no explicit prohibition against cameras on private patios, he noted with satisfaction, Michael installed the camera. He cleverly concealed it within the foliage of his now infamous oversized basil plant, positioning it with a clear view of the outlet. He then connected the digital meter to his home automation system, which would log power usage down to the second. Let's see you deny this, he said, testing the camera's feed on his phone. For the next 5 days, Michael collected data. Every weekday, like clockwork, the system recorded Deborah's arrival between 11:22 a.m. and 11:30 a.m. The footage showed her methodically unlocking his patio gate with what appeared to be a copy key, plugging in her scooter and departing. She would return approximately 1 hour later to retrieve it. The power meter registered exactly how much electricity her scooter consumed, 0.75 kilowatt hours per charging session. On Friday evening, Michael compiled his evidence. He created a spreadsheet showing timestamps, duration, and electricity consumption. He calculated that over the past 3 months, Deborah had stolen approximately 48.75 kilowatt hours of electricity, which at his utilities rates amounted to $197.44. He edited together a highlight reel of the security footage, showing multiple days of the same behavior, and included the photos he'd taken previously. This should be enough for anyone, he said, organizing everything into a folder on his tablet. On Monday morning, Michael requested a meeting with Gregory Phillips, the property manager for Oak Ridge condominiums. At lunch, he sat across from the balding, perpetually harried man in the small management office near the complex entrance. I understand your frustration, Mr. Chen, Gregory said after reviewing the evidence. He removed his glasses and pinched the bridge of his nose. And yes, this is clearly inappropriate behavior on Ms. Wilson's part. Michael leaned forward. So we'll speak to her about it? Ask her to repay what she's taken? Gregory's pained expression didn't change. It's complicated. Ms. Wilson has been HOA president for 4 consecutive terms. She has significant support among the longest-standing residents, particularly on the east side of the complex. But you've seen the evidence, Michael insisted. This is theft, plain and simple. Indeed. Gregory nodded. However, as property manager, I serve at the pleasure of the HOA board, which Deborah effectively controls. The last manager who crossed her found himself unemployed within a month. He lowered his voice. Between us, 3 of the 5 board members are her close friends. They vote as a block on everything. So you're saying there's nothing you can do? Michael asked incredulously. I'm saying, Gregory replied carefully, that confronting Deborah directly through official channels may not yield the results you're hoping for. If I were in your position, he trailed off, then slid Michael's tablet back across the desk. Well, I'm not in your position, but I sympathize, truly. As Michael left the office, he understood the unspoken message. No one with any authority was willing to stand up to Deborah Wilson. If he wanted justice, he would have to find another way. 3 days after Michael's meeting with the property manager, a crisp white envelope appeared under his door. Inside was an official HOA violation notice citing his non-compliant window treatments and demanding correction within 7 days. The notice was signed with Deborah's distinctive flourish and included a $50 administrative processing fee. The following day, another envelope appeared, this time citing improper storage of recreational equipment because his running shoes had been left on his welcome mat to dry after a rainy morning jog. Another $50 fee was assessed. This is ridiculous, Michael said aloud as he added the notices to a growing file. In the 10 days since their confrontation, he'd received 7 separate violation notices, each more trivial than the last. His storage closet door was improperly latched during an inspection. His welcome mat was not an approved design. The cleaning products under his kitchen sink weren't properly labeled as required by safety regulations. His neighbor across the hall, Sophia Patel, stopped him in the corridor one evening. I see you've made Deborah's list, she said sympathetically. She does this to everyone who crosses her. Last year, the Hendersons and Forsey questioned her decision to replace the lobby furniture without a vote. They received 15 violations in 3 weeks before they got the message and stopped attending meetings. How does she get away with this? Michael asked, genuinely perplexed. Sophia lowered her voice. Most people just pay the fees and keep their heads down. It's easier that way. The few who tried to fight back found themselves facing special assessments or targeted rule changes. Somehow, the people who stand up to her always end up moving out within a year. At the monthly HOA meeting the following Tuesday, Michael arrived early and took a seat near the front. 27 residents attended, a higher turnout than usual, according to Sophia, who sat beside him. Deborah presided from a slightly elevated table at the front, flanked by 4 board members who rarely spoke except to second her motions. When the floor opened for new business, Michael raised his hand. Deborah pointedly called on 3 other residents first, but eventually ran out of alternatives. Yes, Mr. Chen. Her tone suggested she was granting him a tremendous favor by acknowledging his existence. Michael stood, tablet in hand. I'd like to address an ongoing issue with unauthorized use of private utilities. Specifically, Mr. Chen, Deborah interrupted smoothly, personal grievances between neighbors are not appropriate for the general meeting. There's a mediation process outlined in Section 9 of the bylaws. She smiled thinly at the assembled residents. We must respect everyone's time by adhering to our agenda. This isn't a personal grievance, Michael persisted. It's a matter of community standards and ethical. Moving on, Deborah spoke over him. We need to discuss the board's proposal for updated landscaping regulations. We've noticed several units with non-compliant vegetation that exceeds height restrictions. Her gaze fixed pointedly on Michael. Additionally, we're proposing changes to the exterior storage policy, specifically addressing items left in common corridors, such as footwear. The meeting continued with Deborah proposing 5 new rules that, while written in general terms, would clearly impact Michael's unit most severely. When the votes came, the outcome was predetermined. Deborah's supporters raised their hands in unison, while others looked at their phones or studied the carpet. As residents filed out after the meeting, Michael noticed something else, the subtle way people avoided making eye contact with him, as if his status as Deborah's newest target might somehow be contagious. He had become radioactive in his own community, all because he dared to question the actions of the woman who now watched him from across the room with the satisfied smile of someone who had won yet another round. Michael sat in his dimly lit home office late Friday night, surrounded by circuit diagrams and electrical schematics. The steady accumulation of violation notices pinned to his corkboard served as a constant reminder of Deborah's vindictiveness. The latest, a citation for excessive indoor illumination visible from common areas after 10 p.m., had arrived that morning. This has to end, he muttered, his fingers drumming against his desk. Direct confrontation had failed. Official channels had proven useless. Deborah's position seemed unassailable, at least through conventional means. But Michael hadn't spent 15 years as an electrical engineer solving complex problems to be defeated by a neighborhood tyrant with a clipboard and a rulebook. He pulled up the building's electrical plans on his laptop, documents he'd managed to obtain by befriending Marco. one of the maintenance staff who sympathized with his situation. Michael had helped Marco diagnose an issue with the building's HVAC system the previous month, and the grateful maintenance worker had been happy to share the building's infrastructure documents. Every system has its vulnerabilities, Michael said to himself as he studied the diagrams. It's just a matter of finding them. The Oak Ridge condominiums had been built in the early 2000s, with each unit having its own circuit breaker panel. However, certain sections of the building shared common power routing through junction boxes located in the maintenance areas. Michael traced the lines carefully, his trained eye spotting something interesting. His unit and Deborah's shared a particular electrical pathway. "Perfect," he whispered. Over the weekend, Michael ordered specialized components online, a microcontroller, custom relays, a current sensor, and various electronic parts that would raise no suspicions among his colleagues if they happened to see the packages. He set up a workbench in his spare bedroom and began assembling a device that would monitor electrical current with precision. The concept was elegant in its simplicity. Michael's device would detect the specific power signature of Deborah's scooter. The particular way it drew current while charging was as distinctive as a fingerprint. When that signature was detected on his outdoor outlet, the device would create a controlled feedback loop in the circuit shared with Deborah's unit, causing her breakers to trip without affecting any other units or common areas. Not enough to damage anything, Michael explained to his reflection in the window, just enough to interrupt her power. By Wednesday evening, he had created a prototype. He tested it using an electrical load simulator that mimicked the charging pattern of Deborah's scooter model, which he had identified from his security footage, a TravelMax Elite 3000, known for its quick charge capability and distinctive power draw profile. The device performed perfectly in simulation. When it detected the scooter's charging pattern, it created a harmless but effective power fluctuation that would trigger any standard circuit breaker. The final touch was ensuring the device itself was undetectable. Michael disguised it as an ordinary weatherproof outlet cover, virtually identical to the original. He added a small backup battery so it could function even if someone tried to reset the breaker during an outage, and programmed it to maintain detailed logs of when it activated. As he put the finishing touches on his creation, Michael felt not just satisfaction, a sense of justice. This wasn't about revenge, it was about consequences. Deborah had abused her position, stolen his resources, and targeted him when he tried to address the issue reasonably. Now physics and electrical engineering would accomplish what community governance had failed to do. "Let's see how you like having your power manipulated," Michael said as he held the finished device, a slight smile playing across his lips. Sometimes justice requires a technical solution. Saturday morning arrived with perfect weather for Michael's operation. Most residents would be at the community farmers market, an event Deborah had instituted and never missed, giving him the ideal window to install his device without unwanted attention. Michael sipped his coffee on the patio, casually surveying the area while mentally rehearsing each step. At 9:15 a.m., he saw Deborah emerge from the building in her signature beige pantsuit, clipboard in hand, ready to micromanage the market vendor's tent placements. Once she disappeared around the corner, he gave it another 10 minutes before retrieving his toolbox from under the sink. "Just a routine outlet maintenance," he muttered to himself, the practiced explanation ready if anyone asked. He wore a polo shirt with the logo of a local electrical company he found online. Not quite impersonation, he reasoned, just enough visual cover to avoid suspicion. The installation took less than 15 minutes. Michael removed the existing outlet cover, disconnected the power, and carefully integrated his device into the circuit. He tested the connection, verified the sensor calibration, and replaced the cover with his modified version, visually identical to the original except for a nearly microscopic indicator light visible only if you knew exactly where to look. After resetting the breaker, Michael ran a quick diagnostic from his phone. The app he created showed a green status indicator. The device was active and monitoring power consumption patterns. "Now we wait," he said, packing away his tools and removing all evidence of the modification. Monday arrived, and Michael deliberately scheduled a video conference he could take from home rather than going into the office. At 11:24 a.m., his security camera alerted him to motion on his patio. Right on schedule, Deborah appeared, wheeling her scooter through the gate. Michael minimized his conference call and opened the monitoring app, watching as the power consumption graph began to spike in the familiar pattern of the TravelMax Elite 3000 charging cycle. 3 minutes after Deborah plugged in her scooter, his device recognized the signature power draw and activated. According to his app, the feedback loop executed perfectly, sending a precisely calibrated power fluctuation through the shared circuit path. Michael's lights didn't even flicker. His phone rang 17 minutes later. It was Sophia from across the hall. "You won't believe what's happening," she said, her voice hushed with excitement. "Deborah is having some kind of meltdown in the lobby. Her power went out, and she's convinced it's a targeted attack by the power company because she filed a complaint about their tree trimming practices last month." Michael managed to sound surprised. Really? My power is fine. That's just it, Sophia continued. It's only her unit. Gregory called maintenance, but they can't find anything wrong with the building's systems. They reset her breakers twice, but they keep tripping. The third time it happened, she started yelling about conspiracies. After ending the call, Michael checked his security feed. Sure enough, the scooter remained plugged into his outlet. He watched as the maintenance man, Marco, appeared on camera, looked at the scooter with a puzzled expression, then made a call on his radio. A minute later, Gregory, the property manager, arrived, staring at the scooter, then up at Deborah's window with a slowly dawning comprehension. Michael switched camera feeds to the lobby security camera he'd accessed through the building's surprisingly unsecured network. The scene was exactly as Sophia described, Deborah gesticulating wildly, her normally perfect hair disheveled, as she berated a powerless Gregory, while two confused electricians examined their testing equipment. The most satisfying moment came at 12:21 p.m., when Deborah finally returned to remove her scooter from Michael's outlet. Within 30 seconds, his app showed the power fluctuations ceasing, and from his window, he watched as the lights in Deborah's unit flickered back to life. Michael leaned back in his chair, a smile spreading across his face. Correlation established, he whispered to himself. Let's see how long it takes her to make the connection.